Today I'm up above the River Braan, and you can see it running down in its gorge from Rumbling Bridge. You can probably hear it too. It's a lovely March morning with sunshine, birdsong, a biting wind and the promise of showers. And there's a new feeling of optimism after events of earlier on in the week. I was lucky enough to be brought up in countryside like this, but I'm aware that spectacular landscape on its own is not enough to make a country feel good about itself. And when I was growing up in Scotland in the 50s and 60s, it was generally a pretty grim place. Post-war austerity, industrial decline, lack of investment, bad health, bad housing, worse health, sectarianism. There wasn't much to feel cheerful about. And underneath it all, like a lead weight dragging us down, was this feeling that somehow we just weren't very good at anything. It was a story that it suited the governments of the day to encourage. People with low self-esteem tend not to cause trouble. They don't have necessarily much awareness of what they actually have or how good they are at things. That's certainly very different today. There's a new confidence, a new energy, a new spirit and appetite for change. But there are still people who have an interest in keeping that old story going. I think of our media. I don't imagine there's anywhere else in the Western world where 95% of all newspapers and broadcasters, and I include the BBC in this, are actively hostile towards the views of at least 50% of the voting population, who make it their business regularly to talk down the country. And so it's not that hard to see why, although many people are drawn to the idea of independence, when it actually comes to it, they find it hard to step across the threshold. They hear that little voice saying, "Oh, but is it too risky? What happens if we fail? Can we really do this?" I sympathise with that. It took me 20 years of living in London and a return to Scotland in middle age before I really started to see things in a very different light. Now what I would say to people who are hesitating is, yes, come on in, it's nice in here. We're a wealthy country with a mature economy and all the building blocks in place that we need to run our own affairs successfully. But then what about that feeling that in some way we're betraying England, we're breaking the Union? Well, my answer to that is, sadly, the Union is already broken and not at our hand. Just look at the British nationalism that has torn us out of Europe. Just look at the attitudes towards Scotland on display in Westminster. Today we're two countries pulling in almost diametrically opposite directions, socially, culturally and politically. And if the Union really had anything to offer us any longer, surely now we'd be hearing about it from the opposition parties in Holyrood and from all the parties in Westminster. But actually what we see is a parade of Union flags, and what we hear is, "Oh, but the Scots don't want another divisive referendum." Well, progress is divisive, and it always has been. Change involves loss as well as gain, which is why it so often has to be fought for. And let's not forget that we are the country whose intellectual, industrial, commercial genius helped to shape the modern world. We're the country about whom Churchill said, "Of all small nations on earth, perhaps no other except the ancient Greeks have contributed more than the Scots to mankind." And so the idea that somehow Scotland is uniquely incapable of running its own affairs and making a success of it is just absurd. There are commentators today, much better known than me, who are saying that this election in May is a fight for our very existence. I don't think they're exaggerating. We can choose on May the 6th to go forward with dignity, self-esteem, with optimism. We can claim what to the 190 odd independent countries around the world is as normal and as natural as birdsong or spring sunshine. Or we can let that old dark story gather force again. We can allow ourselves to be put back in our box for many years. Is that what we want for Scotland? It's certainly not what I want. So please, let's do whatever we can to give the SNP the majority that they need in order to put our future beyond doubt.